basically.
So let's start 56. Yeah, we can go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
So page 56 is the first public works activity that we'll cover, and that's the wastewater treatment plant. As I mentioned Tuesday night and in the transmittal letter, the recommended rate increase on that is 8%, and that is primarily to finance the replacement of the internal mechanisms, everything of the 1972 final clarifier. And just as, again, reiterating this, we don't have a capital reserve, and that, as was pointed out by the Black and Beach study, we have 3 days of total reserves. So any large project like that is not available in the operating budget, so that was the increase, some of the increase. Now, some of the increase is also classification compensation study, utilities, compensation overall, including health insurance and items like that, but that's the total increase, and why it is what it is. So if you guys want to start going through the budget otherwise, go ahead. Anything of note?
Yeah, really, the budget from day-to-day operating is really not changing much. We just wanted to make sure we got this clarifier in the budget for this year. So I can go over some of the items I have earmarked for the $200,000 that we spend down at the plant on an annual. But we try to prioritize some of the stuff, and this clarifier just jumped right out at us. It's needing to be repaired. So.
And across the board, if you look, on the second page under contractual services, in 2018, the actual electric cost $270,000, 2019 trending, and 2020 proposed $309,000. So that's a $40,000 increase that has to be accommodated by rates. Everything that's paid for in this budget is by rates. So when you look at items like insurance, it's going from $82,000 to $88,000. Again, a small increase, but everything is increasing. Landfill fees, again, $73,000 in 2018, $103,000 in 2020. So we can break out for you of that 8% what is due to the final clarifier, but probably half of that, at least, is just due to increases in operating costs from everything from utilities, landfill fees, personnel going up a little bit year over year.
One of the other things that I think we've talked about from time to time at the regular meetings is the nutrient removal. We've been expecting that the state would require us to essentially construct a new plant to meet nutrient removal regulations. That is probably not as near in the future as we had thought it might be. So we are trying to switch gears a little bit and look at what we have to do to not just patch the plant together until we build a new one, but try to realistically extend its life perhaps another 30 to 50 years. We poked around at it, talked to some of the engineers that how do you approach this? Surely there will be a study in our future to address that and then provide some guidance. But you're going to see more of these larger equipment replacement items in the next few years, simply because we're going to have to keep this plant a lot longer than we had kind of thought the last few years. So that's more spending to come. But the good news is we don't expect $60 million plan to show up in our budget in the next 5 years.
Of course, we also had the issue, we got a briefing, was it Black and Beach who did the study in terms of the reserve number
Right.
of fiscal resources that we have to deal with an emergency? And what are we at now? Three days. And so, I don't know, we're not, that's not part of this budget to expand that to 15 days or 30 days or 60 days, but that's something that this commission has been made aware of, correct? And so when we say we got 3 days of reserves, what does that mean in practical terms? I mean, what if it's the plant goes offline and we have to order emergency parts or things like that? Is that what we're talking about?
I would guess that's where that comes from, Mike.
Yeah, it's really more a theoretical construct of
Right.
how robust of an enterprise are you operating. You need to have money available to deal with something as it
That's
shows up.
unforeseen.
And so those percentage guidelines were more, so you have a fund to draw from. So if something happened that we needed to buy, and I don't know what it would be, an earthquake or something like that,
Right.
you can't deal with that with a 3-day or 30-day reserve. You're probably gonna have to do some sort of emergency action if that caused the sewer
Right.
lines to slide into the river or the plant to collapse or something, so.
And another side of the reserve issue is if you have a disruption in revenue. So if we had an event that caused a total disruption in revenues, we still have to pay certain types of expenses, like personnel expenses and those kinds of things. And so that's another area where reserves comes in. You have your operating reserves and then you have your capital reserves. So the operating reserves would be something that you would have on hand to make up for any disruption in revenues.
Okay, that's a good point.
A good analogy to use for the public would say, you have a job, you're a family of 4, and you have a job, and you lose your job today, and all you have are 3 days worth of money to buy food for your family. And then, you've got to find another job within
Exactly.
3 days. I mean, use that analogy, and you see that having a 3-day reserve is very, very poor planning and very poor financial responsibility for a city of our size. And it's not your fault, it's our fault. We've got to correct that problem because we're on the precipice of a potential disaster. Question I have on the flooding events we had this year, I don't know if you can separate out how much did each one of those cost you over and above normal operations, or can you capture that?
Well, what we see, whether it be a rain event or a flood event, is the amount of water coming through the plant.
I'm sorry?
The amount of water coming through the plant.
Yeah.
We still have to treat that water best we can. So that means your electric bill goes up.
But what about, special things, the sandbagging, the diverting because the street was flooded and,
Well, other than the cost of the sandbags.
Including the cost of the sandbags and the sand and some of the annoyance is probably $50,000 at the most.
was there a bunch of overtime that you had to do for the
Yeah,
sandbagging?
yeah, we
So,
spent some
50
overtime. Rain events, we spend some overtime extra. When we had the main flood event, when we were overflowing the aeration basin, we manned the plant, 3-man crew, 24/7.
Okay, so each event was 50,000, so did we have 2 events this year?
That's probably combined for both events.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a 3-day operating reserve, how much does that amount to approximately?
That varies on what your annual expenditures are, but
If you had to ballpark it, just take a
about
walk.
150,000.
So just,
$300,000
we,
something
in
like that.
theory, ate up 33% of that, just putting in sandbags. I mean, if you're, in that, it's not that simple, but it is, that just shows you that 3-day reserve ain't nothing.
That's not.
If there was a disruption in the payment processing end of the thing, where,
That's what it was.
Yeah.
as Ruby
He
was
was saying,
suggesting, the checks don't clear the bank for some
Yep.
hacker reason or something, until it takes some time to get it straightened out, then we got no money.
Yeah, like
that's
an
serious.
attack on our electrical grid or something like that, right? Yeah.
Chuck, I'll butcher the numbers, but when we have an average day, 6 million gallons. we're
Our average
treating
day is
20
3.5 million gallons a day.
And we're treating 20 million
Yeah,
gallons.
the last
during
rain
the
event,
flood.
we treated 21 million gallons that day.
And so that means everything has to run constantly. And so when you see the electricity spike, it's not because they're running the air conditioner more, it's because they're treating 22
Right.
million gallons of water a day
Yeah.
over the normal, and so everything is on all the time.
Yeah,
Which
for-
also stresses the system as well.
Right, because if I don't move it out, then it backs up uptown here. Nobody wants to see that, so.
Yeah.
Normal day, we'll have three big pumps running. They do about 10.5 million gallons a day. We get the flood coming in or a big rain event, I got every pump on I got, and that's 9 pumps.
But with the 8% increase, that'll, all the citizens will pick that up as part of their, what is it? It's related to the water, right? The water bill?
Yeah, the sewer bills are calculated based on the amount of water you use in January, February, and March. that calculation takes effect in July. But the rate increase that is proposed in the budget takes effect as bills that are mailed out in December.
Okay.
So there's lots of moving pieces of that, but this rate increase would take effect in bills that are mailed in December. There's the other adjustment that the waterworks makes in July. So you kind of, something happened to your bill possibly twice a year, has been for quite some time now.
And it does depend on use, but I included in the PowerPoint, it will, on average, equate to about $1.10 a month for the users.
With this 8%.
For the increase.
And this is, an absolute essential function, and particularly what this plant does. Going forward, though, I mean, are we looking at every year an 8% increase, or could there be years where we go with a lesser percent in terms of the increase?
So that's a good question. I can answer that a couple different ways. 8% actually is done by necessity this year for some of the improvements, but with it being an ongoing 8%, it actually satisfies one of the models that Black and Veatch put in place. So then if you do that, then there's a roadmap to
get to
886, and back down to 2 or something like that. So it actually sort of fortuitously getting us into one of the Black and Veatch models. Now the commission could then elect. We wouldn't expect an 8% next year if the commission doesn't go with the Black and Veatch model. If we go back down, we could probably go back down to that 2 to 3% range, potentially, depending on other factors. But it does sort of, was one of the minimal first-year recommendations from Black and Veatch.
Can you come back to the commission?
Yeah, we
later
have the
this
Black
year
and
or
Veatch
next year?
updated numbers. Commissioner
Talk
Browder had
us
asked
about
to
that?
see some examples, and they've provided that. I didn't want to muddy the
No,
waters
no,
with the
that
budget
matters,
discussions,
but-
but they will come forward, and this 8% does actually get us in a good path for one of their scenarios as well.
Yeah, and I'd like to, 8%, to say 8%, that it's, in font this big, 8% increase sounds big, and I'm not saying it's not, but that 8%, as Mr. Kramer said, is $1.10 on average. And over the next 6 to 10 years, and I ran some numbers on it, we're looking at maybe $7 or $8 on average total over that time, maybe as much as $10 over 10 years. That's how much it would increase over today's rate, not $10 next year, but add it all up, and it's probably even less than that. But percentage-wise, because if we're dealing with a small number, people say, gosh, you're raising my rates 8 or 10%, 8% or 6%, but the actual dollars are relatively small. I don't want to diminish it, but I also want to explain it. Quick question on, like today, you're probably going to do 10.5 million, right? 10.5 million gallons of product.
Today, no, our flows are back down to normal, so we'll probably do 3.5, maybe 4.
3.5 million. On the rain event we had Wednesday morning, got 1.5 inches in an hour or something like that. How did that, just for
We've seen a
trivia
spike
purposes,
for
tell
about
me what
4
happened.
Yeah, it takes about 2 hours for the water to get down to the plant after a rain event. So we've seen a spike for about 4 hours, and then came back down.
Okay, I just wondered how, something, when you hit one of those real quickly, so.
Yeah.
And the reason we see the spike, in theory, the rainwater should not get into the wastewater system. And that's the project we're working on every year at 500, between 500 and 600,000 is inflow and infiltration, where sanitary sewer lines have cracks or holes, and so rainwater's getting in there, but we're addressing that slowly and systematically.
We do, as part of the wastewater budget, operate the cleaning crew. We have a TV crew. The technology that we've invested in both of those areas has paid off with greatly enhanced productivity. If nothing else, we get much better pictures from the sewer to explain to ourselves and the public. They have a problem, we can show them a picture. Oftentimes, they come around in the back of the TV truck and can look at the camera, and they understand what we're showing them. It's not just some blurry image that we used to get years ago.
Yeah.
That's been very helpful. We are required to meet some targets for the EPA on cleaning and TVing, and Chuck's crews have done that consistently, even before they came to help us.
Yeah, I think I've reported to Paul here, we went, prior to this last rain event, we went to over 1,200 days without popping a manhole in the city from a rain event until that fatal day where we popped 9 that one day, just because the rain come down so hard. So we are seeing some improvement in overtime and after-hour calls.
A lot of systematic programs. Info and infiltration is just one, but we have a root control program.
Root control.
Every single year.
Yeah.
TV and clean every single year. And Chuck provides me the updated on how many miles have been cleaned and then how many miles have been cleaned of roots, right? He does that by feet, but.
Yeah, we do it by miles. So we've done 25 miles so far this year and about 5 miles of camera crew, and then we did 1,400 feet of Duke's root control this
Has
year.
that been primarily in the northeast portion of the city, or is that with,
The root control?
yeah, root control and just,
Well, no, we identify those lines as our cleaning crew goes out. They pull roots back, we'll
Okay.
put it on the list, and then we'll get it the next spring when they come in, and keep doing it that way.
Trees all over town.
A lot of trees, yes. As far as cleaning, we do sections of the city.
yeah, that's what I was.
Go through sections. We did complete this, last year, the entire city in 4 years, so we're starting over again.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know, yeah.
So and then anytime we have an overflow or somebody calls and their line's plugged up, we'll go out and clean. If we hit something, we'll go back the next day with the camera truck, see what caused the problem.
I think we're about ready to take the sandbags down. I think we're done flooding for a while.
Hopefully.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thanks, Chuck.
Stormwater is really a Curtis story. It's funded from wastewater rates, but it's a two-person stormwater crew with equipment that is, operates out of and is supervised in the operations division under Curtis Marks.
This is not related to the stormwater fee. This is something we've been doing for decades, where there's a two-person stormwater crew funded by the wastewater rates that do stormwater repair work throughout the city.
62.
Page 62.
This particular crew is, I think we're back finally staffed up again. We were kind of rotating people. They would get on, we'd get a position, then they would go to another position in the city, or they would go away. But they work with Curtis to make sure that what they're doing is appropriate. They also work with our GIS department to get information that gets put back into the database as far as depth and condition of various things. Primarily, we try to find things that work toward the skill sets of our employees. In the past, they've reconstructed things. Those employees are not with us anymore. We're now more in a routine maintenance mode where they remove limbs and leaves and brush that are clogging inlets, or identify problems that are of a larger type and scale. They assist us in getting in and out of manholes if we need to for some of the engineering projects that we have. What else do you have them doing?
Well, we actually have submitted for a mini excavator, which is very essential for the jobs that we're planning on doing with the ditching and removing some of the debris in the storm line. So,
An excavator, you said?
mini X,
One
yes,
of
mini
those
excavator.
kind of micro things about the size of a pickup truck. That was received earlier this year, and it's been well used since we got it.
That, not a ditch witch.
No,
No,
it looks like a little mini.
it's got
tractor.
tracks. It has tracks with the
Yeah,
arm on it.
okay.
Yes.
It's the kind of toy you want, a tool you want, excuse me, when you were a kid.
Yeah, no, they do look like it at the time.
So that's the stormwater. They have a certain amount of money budgeted for projects and repairs that may come up that we draw upon. It is originally conceived to meet our requirements under the EPA regulations. They said it wasn't enough, and so we've kind of been dealing with that over the last few years with the stormwater fee and some more aggressive approach to projects. But this crew is focused entirely on stormwater and stormwater related issues.
Good.
but they're working on smaller projects, right, than some of the ones, some of the bigger ones we're funding with our new
That's exactly right. Yeah,
stormwater fee.
the larger ones that get contracted out, they're working on the small ones.
They can do, up to, put in driveway tubes or repair small pieces of pipe up to, pick a size, 24 inches or something. But that's not their primary focus. It's inspection, maintenance. They do actual work though.
Right.
But it's not their primary thing.
Two-person team?
Two-person,
All right.
correct.
Okay.
Special highway.
Special highway,
It's
which
on
is
page-
streets,
Page 65.
page 65. Do you want to explain the revenue on that?
On the highway connecting links and all.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that we've noticed in trying to right-size the budget is that the highway connecting links was formerly in a different fund, and it really relates most specifically to the street fund. So we moved that revenue from the general fund to the street fund. Thereby, by doing that, we believe that we'll be able to eliminate the subsidy that the general fund normally provides to the street fund on that. The motor vehicle tax, there's two different forms of motor vehicle tax. One comes from a state, one comes from the county. It's all tied to the same type of revenues, just a different source. And then the other services, the $361,000, that's FFE funds. And what we've done, the FFE funds are federal funds exchange, and we get those monies through the state of Kansas for reimbursement for projects that we've done. And so we wanted to identify that money and leave it separate so that it's still available for those same kinds of projects. And so those funds are determined by Paul and Public Works on what types of funds, projects those are going to be used on.
What's the lag in getting those funds?
That, when you all turn in your request for reimbursement,
They automatically distribute those based on population annually about April.
okay.
Okay, so you get it once a year, big lump sum.
Right.
Okay.
And I think one of the big things the last transportation secretary did is the state was gonna keep 15% and they cut it back down to 10, is that right? Something like that. And then, so one example of where we've used this recently is Thornton Street design, because it's such a huge project, it was $300,000.
Right.
We hadn't bonded anything yet, so we used FFE dollars to pay for that. FFE dollars are pretty flexible as long as they're pretty much transportation related. So it's a good place to pay for studies before you have to bond out a project, or inspection services, or some aspect of a project that either goes over budget or that you want to add as an add alternate.
The things that we do with streets, there's kind of some big things. You got your snow removal, you got your pothole, basic street repair. There's a lot of other support things between parades and festivals. We run a street sweeping operation. We've kind of tried to refocus that a little bit since we've been having problems with the number of employees actually on the staff. We've reduced some of the street sweeping in the summer to allow those employees to be used on regular street crews. It's kind of counterproductive from a stormwater standpoint. You like to be able to say we run 2 sweepers all year long, but the reality is we need people to help with potholes and some of the other construction maintenance projects that the Curtis's people do.
Do you do potholes every day?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
As long as the demand's there, we do them.
Yeah, okay.
Which is nonstop.
Yeah.
The calls are not near what they were 2-3 months ago, but I think there's still plenty to talk about.
Yeah.
We find potholes that have been there clearly for some time that we hadn't noticed before. I think that's a product of getting the bad ones fixed, and now you see the ones that are kind of eat your car a little less than the larger ones might. So that's we report them to the service center. They get a bundle of them, and they go out and repair them.
Is, just Out of curiosity, Idaho Street, I think it's Idaho Street that runs through the old shopping mall. Is that private or public?
That is a private
Okay,
street.
no more
We
questions.
do have, an easement.
Because there's one the size of a swimming pool.
We have an easement to maintain the traffic signal loop detectors for the street maintenance on that is not ours.
Okay,
And
that's all
I think our easement's only about 100 or 150 feet
I
back.
had calls on, I saw one on the west side, there's
And we
one,
have- yeah.
it could be a swimming pool.
And we have no leverage over those private business owners, other than
I've thought about putting
a
a sign
shaming
up
strategy.
that says, the city maintenance ends here, back down by the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Because it's-
Yeah,
Are you talking about on the parking lot before you get to Hughes? Coming out of the, or
you
the,
come out, going Hughes Road, turn into the backside of
Yeah.
Westlake, and there's
Scott?
one on the south lane.
Made him do it once.
Yeah, we have, you've mentioned that. I won't say we have never patched potholes or paved anything out there, but it's been a directed.
Yeah.
No, we didn't do it. Scott had them take care of it.
Right, but I think we've also patched potholes outside of our easements and things.
Did we do it in charge? Is
Directed.
that what we did? No?
No, you had a company come in and do it, from what
Yeah,
I understand.
Yeah, I think Scott was very forceful in communicating his opinions on those types of things.
What, do you just pick up the phone, Commissioner Dedeke, you think, and put a little
I
moral
don't know, he
suasion on
contacted
them?
somebody
Yeah.
somehow, all I know.
Yeah. Well, it's not something we can get into detail today, but I do think it's not only there's that big pothole, I don't know whether they fixed it, I think it's Applebee's as you go into the park, that's their responsibility, I think.
For them in the state, they need to figure out a way to deal with it.
I'm sorry?
So that's a state of Kansas
state highway.
maintenance. Of
That portion.
Their state maintenance from Lemon Street South, and that's state maintenance on 4th Street, and that water pothole pond thing has been there in one manner, shape, or form for a very, very long time. And between the owners and the state, they should come up with a plan to address it. It is not a problem the city created or should be involved in solving.
Is that something next year when we give our letter to our
I think
representatives?
Applebee's would be pushing that one,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, right.
You
I
would think.
don't know, maybe one of us could go by and talk to the manager, I may do that, I don't know, it's
Just
been there
for their own
forever.
benefit, you'd think they
Right.
would be lobbying to do that, so, anyway.
What else we do? Streets, storm sewer, street sweeping. So we got traffic signals out there. It's a separate budget.
Right, it's a separate
Still
budget.
tourist. We do have a talented younger person on the staff as our traffic signal technician. He's kind of getting spun up to speed. We brought you the sign, kind of like focus on signs a while back. We should start seeing a direct impact from installing signs, specifically as part of the commission's effort to say solidify our appearance or unify our appearance and working with the state, Kansas Correctional Institute, industries to get the signs made has been interesting. I think it'll be very productive once we kind of get some kinks worked out. The traffic signalers, there's 50-something signalized intersections in town. There's, I think, money budgeted for battery backups. It's a very effective tool. The original ones that we have are old and they need replaced. And we've been working on a standardized system, and I think we'll get over a peak here. We'll get back on spending some of those funds.
Are there new traffic signals at Broadway and Cherokee, or did I just wake up and see that, it looks like there's new posts for.
Right, there's a project.
And did they move the traffic signals?
Yes.
A little bit? I know coming down, going east on Cherokee, I thought I noticed that the other day, because I had a blind spot seeing the traffic signal, because there's a tree that comes out. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And the other thing I noticed, which I thought was a good addition, at 4th and Poplar, I was driving on 4th Street yesterday, and the yellow light it was flashing yellow, but about that time, a concrete truck was coming out. Is there a trip that,
Actually, we
or is
actually
it
have,
always going to be flashing yellow now,
We
which I
actually-
think is a good idea.
Yeah, we actually had lightning that struck it, so we're working on that project right now.
I'm sorry?
Lightning struck.
Oh, so that was a mistake. Oh, I kind of like that idea because, you know, people fly around that curve a lot. I say, hey, that's good.
Yeah, normally that would be your traditional, green, yellow, red traffic signal.
Yeah.
Got, I don't know if the pole did or something, or the electrical line did, but it French fried some of the electronic
Okay.
components.
I thought
There is
it was a good idea.
Yeah, that's the thing. Everyone likes the traffic signal, which you oftentimes say, we don't need a traffic signal to solve all the problems. I'll
Right,
have to solve
right.
10% of them.
Yeah.
So once the signal's up, everyone gets to stop to let the one car go through.
Yeah, no, I know.
That might be another week before we get that fixed.
Okay.
We'll fix it as quickly as we can.
But that
Take
one
away
blind
your-
spot coming coming east on Cherokee for.
Broadway and Cherokee, yes, sir.
So the traffic signals, I think have, on the whole, become much more reliable with the modernization effort we've been on with the LED lights, upgraded controllers, and looking forward to getting a lot of stability in the battery backups when the power does go out. You still have signals at your major intersections.
Good.
Okay, some streets.
Oh, did they? What'd they say? Oh, working on it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We're working on got a big order in with Kansas Correctional Industries. We've got a person assigned for his one day, among other things.
Sure.
But on one day, he focuses on installing signs. He's been preparing to install a whole bunch of signs, waiting for these signs to be delivered.
I think we're focusing on the 7th Street corridor
Yes.
first.
That's
We're gonna do corridor by corridor.
Makes sense.
Kind of by,
Okay.
Go from Metropolitan
Moving north to
south.
south, correct.
it doesn't mean that every sign's gonna be replaced.
Right.
If it's a good sign, we'll replace
Right.
that, but we'll square up the poles.
Okay.
If a sign is faded or needs to be replaced, we'll do that.
Take down my old Wrap with Love signs that have been up there for 20 years out on 4th Street. It looks so bad. We used to have those all over town. They were my signs. And it's not, it needs to go. It just looks terrible.
Good.
Okay. 72 is stormwater capital projects. That's the stormwater management fee. Impact. And then that one's still, we're still in our first year. We still don't really know. We have estimates on what the revenue is going to be, but delinquency, delayed, so there's still kind of a fluctuation. So I mean, I honestly don't pay a whole lot of attention to the revenue numbers, but we haven't even finished a full year yet. So we'll have a better idea at the end of this year, and then we'll again have to recalibrate based on the change to multifamily. So it'll be kind of a fluctuating number. I won't go too far into it, but the website includes, the new website has a good start on a stormwater accountability page, project information with budget numbers and photos. We're working on the system now to make sure to do weekly or every other week updates on projects, final budget numbers, engineers' estimates. So Taylor and Charity are working a lot on that. So more transparency for stormwater. We've done a lot of work so far. We're on Orange Fence #1 right now. What are we, halfway done with that one? That big project, and then a lot of studies out to look at a lot of different projects, and made the decision, I think, to go forward Second and Chestnut on a bonded project with Independence Court. So a lot of shovels in the dirt, studies out there, and design work going on, and only about 6 months into the program. So been happy with how it's moved along. And we are getting, good or bad, we're getting a lot of calls from the community. I think it's a good thing because it indicates people know that it's out there. They know why they're paying it. Sometimes it ends up being not the news they want to hear. It becomes a private property issue or something like that. So we're dealing with a lot of, I guess, demons of the past. A lot of private development who have piped ditches that the city hasn't done, that those pipes haven't been maintained over the last 30 years, so they're filled with sediment and collapsing. It's not city infrastructure. I'm not saying that's not something at the end of the day we don't have a role in, but that's going to be if I was going to preview for the rest of this commission, and then as the new commission sets up, we're going to probably have to start coming up with some policies or some sort of general direction based on specific, doesn't mean you can't take them on a case-by-case basis, but so that there's some, consistency with how we react to a lot of
That
these.
would be good, because we have been getting several calls on those things.
Right, and most of the times, it's not only not the property owner who lives there, it probably wasn't the one before them, it was
Right.
3 or 4 property owners ago. And a lot of it, again, and I won't harp on it too long, is they weren't allowed by city regulations, but they weren't prohibited, that kind of activity. So a lot of it is, how did the city let this happen? Well, it just wasn't against the regulations at that point, but it certainly wasn't permitted.
Okay.
And did we just finish up, what's it, phase 2 of Thornton 16th Terrace? That project was
Right. Well,
was
we-
just,
Yeah, there's some, I would say confusion, but the definition of which phase is what.
right,
But yes, we finished the primary initial phase, which was the detention basin and regrading the swale. We're preparing, that was the swale between the
Right,
houses. We're
right.
preparing to put out for bid, or need some easements to construct the swale, excuse me, the berm upstream of the pond to divert a lot of the sheet flow back into the pond. And then to extend the improvements downstream from where the current project has stopped.
right.
And there's possibly an additional phase from the end of that
Sure.
project to go down to Violet Street.
Yeah, if you have to make some I think that you got a good plan. If you have to make some adjustments in terms of the phases, just so everyone's on the same sheet of music, I would do that, so.
It's been very interesting to watch the pond detention basin perform in the rain. It seems to be doing what we expect it to do. The engineer that designed that's very, very interested in performance, and so am I. So we've been collaborating. I arranged with, actually wastewater does the measurements for us with the data loggers. It look like, kind of little mini pipe bombs, which kind of disorients some folk. In the ponds, and then I sent the data to them. They said if it ever slows up, they're gonna dig into it and see what they can do to make it perform more in line with what they expect. And that's a common problem throughout this part of the country is cities, they invest a lot of money in infrastructure and detention basins. They're required of developers and industrial sites. Nobody goes back and measures whether it actually performs like you think it ought to. We're one of the few communities that does that. So it's been kind of fun to be on that.
And the work on Lemon Street has started
Yes.
too, yeah. I
Right.
seen it was blocked off, trying to go to the gym.
Yeah, that's, hopefully they'll be in and out of there in less than 2 weeks. More
Okay,
like
that's good.
10 days. And if there's the opportunity to, if something happens, we hope we could get some sort of temporary passage through there if something happens that they can't finish on schedule. But they dug down there, about 4 or 5 feet, I think, and they found the old road.
Yeah.
Curbs and pavement and everything, about 5 feet below the ground. Unbelievable
Wow.
how we've changed that. Before my time, but it is,
That went through a tunnel.
Went through the tunnel there, yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
it's an interesting part. It was
I remember that time.
workers.
Yep, you had to honk your horn to go through the tunnel.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was a very
Unlikely.
kind of remote, lightly populated part of the community, not too many years ago.
Well, Emmett was the city limits for
Yeah.
a lot of years.
Nothing out there.
What was,
Limit.
Street was.
Limit.
So is that how the street got its
That's how it's
name?
got its name.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Move to garage on 73. We have a master mechanic and 2 mechanics that handle fleet maintenance for the city. So if you guys want to take it over, I don't believe that there's a lot of changes in this budget.
It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
We work really hard to avoid accumulating an excess parts inventory. The business has changed from what it was 30 years ago, where if you need a part, you better have it. Now, most of the places, if you need a part, if you know you need a part tomorrow, chances are really good you can order it today and have it delivered by the time you need it. So that's kind of cut down on our stock room. There's still a tendency to accumulate more stuff than you need, but we work on that. Between the 3 mechanics, there's a parts clerk, record person, and then there's a fuel operation that's kind of operated from the garage also. And there's little changes here and there. Fundamentally, the operation remains the same. They try to schedule work in advance. We keep track of the miles on the vehicles for preventive maintenance or routine maintenance. If somebody's car doesn't show up, they will contact them and ask them to please bring it in at the earliest available opportunity. There's a kind of a prioritization schedule of if you have too much work, it's okay to send some of it out. It's kind of your public safety vehicles are at the top, and right underneath that is trash trucks, and right under that, and when the winter is snowplows.
Yeah.
So, they're a fairly talented group of folk at this point. I think they've all been there long enough to become effective members of the team.
Yeah, I'd echo Mr. McDonald's sentiments. Everything seems to be running fluent to this point. Fleet maintenance is a program that helps us stay on top of when regular maintenance is due on all the vehicles, so we do contact the departments directly and let them know. And especially if they're running late on equipment, we try to get it in. I think as a whole, the garage is functioning the way it should be. I'm very pleased with the way its operations are playing out right now, so.
It's kind of interesting how the software's come a long ways from just tracking work orders and things. There's, it's tied, of course, it's all tied into the internet, and it will tell you if there's a recall on this equipment, and if your particular vehicle has been or not been satisfied through the recall, or you can look up the documents that used to come in the big binders. That's all. We used to thought we'd gone high tech when we got them on CDs, but now it's all on the internet for the most part, other than some very specialty type documents. It will tell you if you're, say, if there's a recall or some other regulatory facet with what you have, or that there's an alert. Your emission control system is, that there was a problem with it. And you need to inspect something to prevent further problems. It's been a big transition, and I think with the staff we have there that they're keeping up with.
How many vehicles approximately do you service, like, on a year?
Yeah, it's at least 100.
Okay.
Okay,
Big
service,
ones and small ones.
service center, page 74, unless you have
Yep.
other questions on the garage.
Service center is kind of everything that's inside the fence out there. This budget, way back in the beginning, we said the operations superintendent is in charge of maintaining order at the service center property. That is essentially Thornton on the south side, north to Pennsylvania Station Apartments. From the railroad tracks on the east side and west, there's a fence behind the row of houses. There's other people occupy space in the building and on the property. There's the Parks Department, you got a garage operation, we got a recycling operation. You park your vehicles, you got your police evidence, there's all kinds of things. And the theory is somebody needed to be in charge of that, and Curtis is currently that person. And this budget is to address things that are for the building in general and the site in general. There's probably some long-term things we'd like to talk about briefly. The short term is, I think there's some building maintenance money that's available again next year to take care of odds and ends with the building. There is, we have talked internally about, we have more property than we occupy. We purchased or were given, I can't remember at this point. On the west side of the property, we have a fence near where the high voltage power lines are. We own quite a bit of property. We do mow it further to the west. About someday we're going to need to relocate that fence to the west and occupy that property as we continue our programs, particularly some of the solid waste with the recycling operation, stockpiling of material or equipment that's used temporarily. Parks has kind of increased their fleet of things, and so that's kind of on our list of things that we probably ought to look at. It's not critical, but it's maintenance down the line on the service center. We try to maintain the fences and the gates and the lights. And the skylight, I guess.
Right, well, my vision personally is to utilize all the space that the city owns. I'd like to move the recycling site over to the northwest section that we do own on the outside of the property, the boundary line right now. So that would open up some other areas for more equipment to be stored properly. There's some.
We just talked about making the recycling center more user-friendly.
Correct.
Attractive, easy to get in and out
Easy to
of.
get in and out.
If
That's
anybody's
the
been there
hardest
lately, or have you ever seen it, you know it's pretty congested, especially on
It
a
is.
busy day. So
part.
I hate to say it, but it's an accident waiting to happen. I'd like to open it up a little bit more and make it more appealing to the public. I think it's been around since, 91, 92, the service center. There's some parts of the service center that have aged and that we're trying to stay on track with, and CIP is helping with that as well. The salt dome, the roof, we talked about that briefly, but there's other things that we're gonna need. We talked about pavement, the parking lot, and things of that nature, but we're trying to stay on top of it. But yes, that's my vision, is to try to open it up and beautify it at the same time.
A recycling center is supposed to be just for Leavenworth citizens, correct?
Supposed to be what?
City of Leavenworth residents. yes.
City of Leavenworth residents.
But they don't really ask for any ID or.
No, we see I see a lot of cars from outside the area.
Well, in theory,
And even
that
from
recycling,
across the river. I've seen some
in the
from across
past,
the
we
river.
actually, I don't wanna say made money on it, but it was at least break even, cause people would buy, but now,
No, we don't.
With the economy, the way
now
recycling.
we're probably losing money. And some cities are stopping their recycling curbside program because
I think some of the-
China's no longer buying the.
Some of that money that's being lost, or that we think is being lost, I think it gets lost in the concept of keeping it out of the waste stream, so you're not dumping it into a landfill. It's actually
Yeah.
going somewhere to get recycled, so.
Yeah.
There's so many.
I like it.
It's
I
not
use
as
it.
simple, you know, you pay this much for
I wanna
it,
keep
it's
it.
more complex.
Global economy comes to Leavenworth, and there's no market for a lot of this stuff. It is still useful, but you're not gonna get paid for it.
Yeah.
It was never a get-rich
Yeah,
program. It was
yeah,
never about
no,
that.
it's not.
But we
It's,
do,
it gets a lot of use, it's a good program, people
We do
use it, love it.
we do actually take it to recyclers. We don't put it in the nice dumpsters all sorted and take it to the landfill. It does go to people that
Yeah.
take the glass, they take the plastic, they take
Yeah.
paper. And some of it, in the past, you get paid fairly well for some of it, most of it not so much.
Yeah, yeah, it's not a moneymaker, that's for sure, but it's a good service.
So do you think, in terms of some of the things you're thinking about, do you think it'll come in the next year or two to the commission to share in terms of your vision for?
I believe so. I'm gonna do everything I can to bring it to your attention,
And
so.
Curtis and I
It'd be
have been
good.
talking
Look
about
forward
it
to
for a
seeing
long
it.
time, and I think that we'll have a presentation. We'll work with city manager to make sure. that
Sure.
He's confident in what we're talking about,
right.
and then bring it to you.
Right. I'd be supportive of at least looking at
Looking at.
what you envision, so. Because I remember you talking to me a little bit about that when we took our transition tour back in November, December of 2017, so.
There's probably some neighborhood outreach we'll have to.
Right, absolutely, yeah, that's why, yeah, you're right.
Refuse. Refuse starts on 75. We could do a whole hour on refuse and sort
Yeah, we
of the
need to
changes
keep it
we've
short,
done.
'cause I have to leave at noon.
Okay, so we changed the trash routes schedule, which hadn't been changed in years, 2,300 residences, that's going well. We're still experimenting with waste management. I think we're gonna do one more year contract. We've talked to the county about transfer station, again, another discussion for another time, but they've done a good job being flexible and changing this year. 6%, you remember last year we got off track with the truck because we had to buy one for one that was a lemon, so this is a truck year. So normally we're coming off an increase from last year, and you're seeing the larger increase this year. This is the year we're supposed to buy a truck. And so that's why you're seeing that increase. The compensation and classification study impacted refuse collectors as we hoped it would, maybe not as much as we hoped it would, but it did. So that's an increase in utilities. So that's why you're seeing it. It's a truck year. Salary increases and some utility increases is what accounts for the 6% requested rate increase.
Would we expect to see a 5 or 6% rate increase for all future years, or could there be times?
Normally
when-
we didn't. Normally we try to even it out, but truck years
Yeah,
kind of
right,
throw
I
that
understand what
out.
happened with the truck, but.
Right. when we get through the end of 2019, we'll know better how it went going to waste management. This is still halfway through our first year of going to waste management. And then we changed the routes halfway through the year, which has helped the busy days and the overtime. We're getting into overtime situation on Thursdays, but that's sort of changed. So this has really been a transition year, really learning on how to gauge the costs that we're incurring with sort of the whole new way that we're doing it.
I think the route change went really, really well. Hauling to Deffenbaugh, it's had its moments, good ones and bad ones. The kind of the truth is, you're a whole lot better off to get to Deffenbaugh, waste management, landfill before, what, 9:30 or 10? Because if you get there at 10:30 or 11, you're gonna be there all day.
Oh,
So you need to get there in the morning, and it's okay to get there late in the afternoon when they're peak. We got a picture somewhere of one of the trucks was in line with, what, you could count 18 trucks in front of them or
It's
something.
about 25.
How many trucks go up there a day from here?
Typically, 8 to 10 loads are dumped. And so working with Steve King, who's the refuse foreman, I said, my personal goal is I don't want to take any trucks to the transfer station. He and Curtis have convinced me that that's a fine goal, but it's not practical. Says if you want to get the trash picked up before 8 o'clock at night, the turnaround time was, with the way the routes were structured, you were spending too much time with your trucks on the road. So you have all your trash collectors who've now filled up another truck and it's gone. And so you don't have anything to do, you don't have another truck. So what we tried 2 or 3 different things. You take your trucks in the early morning before the day starts, take them down to Deffenbaugh, or do you take your loaded trucks in the morning instead of going to the transfer station late in the morning, take them to the Deffenbaugh late in the morning, take them to the transfer station, get them dumped and back on the route. And we've kind of learned a few things that have been incorporated, and just reviewing last week's information with the route changes and kind of some of the I call it headspace and timing to get your trucks in the most effective way to dump. It looked like we've reduced quite possibly the number of trucks per week to hopefully single digits once we get past this learning period and the grass season.
No other questions on the refuse operations, refuse restricted? That's the landfill maintenance in Lansing. So that's just the cost of mowing and erosion control out
Occasionally
there.
there's a small project out there from time to time to address erosion or we had too much, was it Johnson grass or
Johnson
something? We
grass,
had to, the landfill inspector said that it's on a hill you can't mow, but it's on a hill we need to see, so you gotta do something. So we took out the Johnson grass with some chemicals. Hopefully get some better, more appropriate grass.
So the 6% increase this year, I mean, for next year, is it a set dollar amount for every?
Yes, because everybody pays the same, so I believe it was $1.35 is what it is.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that, right.
And I think hopefully our staffing will stabilize itself too with some of the long days, short days. A lot of staff from refuse was finding other jobs within the city and kind of left them short-handed, and I think we're back up, although we have one going on military tour.
We're currently 2 positions short with a third with going on military leave. He'll be gone for a year. The variables Mr. McDonald spoke on real quick is very important to consider with your trucks. If they break down, that throws things out of sync. If you have people that take vacation or sick leave or whatever, so you want to make sure your numbers are up to ideally perform what is being asked of us to perform, which is go to the landfill. So we're working hard to get to that point.
I think that's it for you, Curtis.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Engineering on page 81. Mike and his staff, there's some salary changes were due to classification and compensation study. In the addition of the civil engineer. So even though this shows up in the operating budget, it'll be paid for by the savings from engineering. So that's the big change in that budget, with the addition of the civil engineering position.
Yeah, it's a pretty small group up there. We do a lot of administrative things for public works. Everyone, my street lights out to, that's this hole in my backyard that didn't used to be there, to sorting out people's water and sewer bills, on to designing massive mega projects, working with our consultants on things like Thornton, or finding a way to expedite 10th Avenue repairs. So we cover it all. We're excited about the civil engineer coming to kind of get back, hopefully, to some of what we did back in the 70s, early 80s. A lot of projects were turned out by city forces. They had a staff of about 3 people that kind of surveyed and designed projects. We've gotten away from that. It's a chance to see if we want to, how heavy we want to get back into it. So it will be really interesting and exciting to try to fully involve that position in the projects that the commission has identified we should.
And is that position being advertised for right now? Or?
No, it won't be funded until January 1, so we'll probably put it out in October.
I am going to be doing some research with my peers on if the person that we need is actually out there. What does it take to attract them? Make sure that that
Right.
we think we've done our homework, but now it's getting time to get serious about it. And
Absolutely.
Make sure we're right.
Yep.
Or if they have somebody that they feel is capable, that they may don't want to watch for it.
Staying upstairs inspections, that is exactly what it sounds like. We have chief building inspector and then 2 inspectors right now. That's Hal's office, on page 82. Building, all the permit fees are really tough to gauge year to year, or tough to forecast. So Hal, I don't know if you have anything to add, but not much changed in this budget, line item to line item.
I was gonna say, expense-wise, nothing's really changed. As Paul said, it's hard to gauge revenues. Last year, we did 29 new homes. At this point right now, we have 7 in the process, which would bring us to a total of only 11 for this year, but typically that can kick up again in the fall. We have a couple commercial projects that are hopefully not too far away from getting started.
Did 795 Spruce apply for a building permit?
Not yet.
I don't believe so.
They have a dye test, was that today?
They dye tested today, and the short version is that the church building itself, they confirmed that it's connected to the sewer line. The house at 795, water went away. They did 2 bathtubs worth of water into the sewer system, but no dye showed up anywhere. So we don't know where it's going.
Okay. Separate story, separate time.
Talk about that later.
What's next, Paul?
Yeah, so I don't know if you have any questions for Hal's office, really talented inspectors. We used to have 3, we have 2. We haven't got back to the point of requesting 3 again. I think we're handling the work that we have.
Yeah.
We've added a lot to their plate also. They've been assisting us with erosion control inspections, with the implementation of our erosion control and disturbance permits. Basically, if it's a street or road construction project, it's handled with engineering and staff and inspectors. If it's a building permit environment, then Hal and his inspectors deal with the erosion control. Occasionally there are hiccups, but we're all getting better at it. The contractors understand that it is important, and we try to confirm to them that we're watching.
Buildings and grounds on 83 doesn't have any personnel in it. It's just the contracts we pay for maintaining the building and grounds. Library maintenance, another small one on 84. That's just services.
On the inside of the building itself, the
Annually.
facility
How do you wanna
itself?
talk about-
Yes, just maintaining
The facility,
yes.
not the external grounds.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Just the building itself.
Yes.
That's,
Right.
the outside is generally Parks
Yes,
Department.
okay. Right.
We've dealt with, some of the atrium project.
Right.
We did, the restrooms.
Sure.
Which shined up pretty nicely. If you haven't been in to take a look at that.
Good.
In the past, we've done exterior siding, replacement of some failed wooden siding with the metal panels, or the interesting trendy architectural panels, I guess, that are there.
Recently upgraded their exterior lighting for them as well.
And we finished a big air conditioning project, a multi-year project last year.
Street lighting on 85, again, the city, although most of the street lights in the city are Westars, the city does still have some street lights, so that's the, 99% of the cost in that is electric for the city's maintained street lights.
Right.
There's much to that.
And the airport.
Then 86 is the airport. The airport doesn't rely on revenue because the revenue goes to the fixed-based operator, both the gas sales,
Thank you, sir.
flying lessons, all those things. So those just represent costs. Right now, it's closed. The fort notified me yesterday that they've entered a 30-day period where they can then pump test at the end. But nothing's changed on that budget year to year. It actually slightly went down, but just within the margin, so there's nothing else on the airport.
We did receive an appropriate insurance check from flooding, the first round of flooding that we saw out there. And we'll be proceeding to work with our FBO engineers to get the facility back operational, the part that the insurance check was related to, not the part that he's responsible for.
Quick question for Ruby and Brandon. Looking at health insurance for everything, wastewater treatment plant proposed, stormwater proposed, et cetera. Some of the health insurance raises are 30 to 50%. And does it match with salary increases? Is that a blip? Is that incorrect? Look at page 56, for example, 30% increase. Page 62, 35% increase. Page 72, 50% increase in health insurance and expenses, while the rest of the departments have that 8%, while these are real high, and I don't know if that was.
It could be plan changes,
Personnel?
it could be,
Personnel.
personnel changes.
But when I look at the salaries and things like that, it doesn't increase that much, and I don't want to really get into it, because I look at the other ones and they're, are these the correct, if these are the correct numbers, tell me, and I'm fine with it.
So health insurance is not based on a percentage of salaries. Health insurance
It's
is,
based on number of employees.
and the types of coverage that they have. So if you have changes in personnel, they could have gone from maybe single coverage to family coverage, or they have,
I understand.
so we just need to look in.
So that is correct, that some of these are 30 and 50%, because the rest of the departments were basically at the 8% level.
Right, and
Okay, that's fine.
Especially the smaller departments, if you have 5 employees,
Yeah.
and you bring on someone who's single, and then they leave, and then you have someone that has a family plan.
That's gonna-
Yeah,
It's gonna
okay,
increase significantly.
I got
That's
it.
good insight, though.
Thank you.
Okay.
That concludes the operating budget. The two changes that I was gonna incorporate from the commission are the Eagles Field batting cages and an allocation for library landscaping, one-time contracted thing from the CIP that still leaves some CIP funding down. Everything else is before the commission as presented for any kind of comments or changes.
You got any comments before you go?
No, I'm good.
Two things on, obviously, we heard from the library director yesterday, and I understand his plight, but the library, in fact, is getting more funding than they did the years before. And we talked about an operational reserve. The library doesn't need an operational reserve. If their roof caves in, for example, doesn't cost them a nickel, it costs us, the city, because we maintain all the things that they would need to maintain a reserve for. So I'm not in favor of changing anything from what Ms. Maloney and Mr. Mills proposed, Mr. Kramer proposed on the library. On roads, I'm very proud that we're moving it up to $2 million from 1.35. I would also even, bring up the thought of even kicking more into it for a period of time, whether it be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, something that would sunset the make a huge impact, taking up at maybe as much as $3 million for a couple of years, but that'd take, obviously, then you're talking about revenue enhancements, which is a fancy word for a mill increase. And I don't know that there's an appetite for that, but if there was, it would have to go 100% into roads and have to be, written specifically that it's sunsetted at a particular time, and it couldn't be transferred through creative accounting into something else. The roads are the most pressing issue, I think, that we have in the city, and I'm also a
Stormwater is the most.
well, stormwater, yes. There's many pressing things, but roads is right up there with one of the top. And blight removal and continuing on that path is very important to me, at least.
I support you 100%.
I'm sorry?
Excuse me. I said I support you 100% on the library. I think that we should go just the way Paul initially proposed it.
Yeah.
I'm in favor.
And so with what we talked about yesterday, what the initial proposal from the city manager and the city staff is, just review the bidding of where we would be with the library. In other words, would he have some flexibility to put some of that general fund money into the
So the library's presented budget based on an increase would have only required a city mill of 3.43 mills. So our proposal would give them 3.75 mills, which is about 70,000 more.
Okay.
And now they were short on their employee benefits on about $53,000. So they would be able to make themselves whole in the employee benefits fund and still have about $16,000 more than their budgeted, submitted budget. So they would actually end up, in having it in the 3.75 line, the general fund gives them much more flexibility than having it in the benefits fund, because general fund dollars can be used for benefit fund, and benefit funds cannot be used for general expenses.
And just about any other way that we did it would have been a small, but it's still been a mill increase, correct?
Yeah.
And I think at first it was presented like, oh my gosh, I have to cut operations, I have to cut services or something now because, I didn't get as much money. Yeah, they actually got more money because of the increase. There was, in theory, we could get more money if we, raise the taxes, but we don't. So we're not diminishing the operational budget of the library or cutting out services because we're not funding them. It's all there. Am I correct in that statement, Mr. Kramer?
I believe so.
Yeah, so.
And the only other thing I would say in terms of roads, because my vision is that, yes, this is a critical area and that we've made a really important step forward this year with the additional $650,000. But, we looked at a budget. That's not only for this year, that's through 2024. I know each year we've got to revisit it, but there is that, those are the figures that are in the, and so that's a significant amount of money over a 5-year period. And so I just wanted to,
And none of that will be diverted for Thornton or 10th. That's
Right.
20 million or 10 million over the next 10 years to not those projects.
I appreciate the city manager and the staff looking to where we could go internal to the budget to find those trade-offs and to spend the money in this particular area, because it'll make a difference in terms of quality of life for all the citizens in the city.
Well, I just want to say thank you to all the city employees for taking time out and going through the budget. Like I said, I know it was very tough and timely, but like I said, you did an excellent job. We appreciate your services.
Good job.
That's it.
We are adjourned.
All right.
Yep. Meeting adjourned.
Yep.
Mr. Curtis.